We're going back.
Okay, and the siren has finished over here.
Okay, it was a little difficult to hear, but very strange experience seeing the streets so empty, obviously.
Right, so already here, they're already empty. I don't know if you can hear, there's now planes above us because they're practicing for the flyover, which they're still planning to do tomorrow, I believe.
Right.
So a lot of planes overhead in the last couple of days. But yes, that was the siren, which is the third siren we've had in the space of a week, because we obviously had one last week, Yom Hazikaron, and then last night and again this morning.
Right. While we're waiting for Michael to come back, we'll just pause and say the memorial prayer, and then I'll hand over back to you guys. 1 second. Okay. Hopefully it'll be on the screen. Here we go. El Malirachamim, Shoichem Bamroimim, Hametzei Menucha Nechoino, Tachas Kanvayasher Chino, Malois Kedoshim Terim, Kezarikim Azhirim, Es Ishmois, Kol Giborim Ameinu, Shemasru Nafsham Al Gulas Artzeinu, Ana Malirachamim, Hastirein B'Tzeil, Kanafech Al Yoilamim, so it's a chaimes nishmasam, Adonai u'nachalasam, Enuch mishlam mishkavam, v'neimar, Amen. O Lord of compassion, God on high, the souls of those amongst our people who bravely gave their lives to redeem your land, grant clear and certain rest for you in the highest lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. O source of mercy, forever fold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Hashem, they are yours. May they rest in peace, and let us say Amen.
Amen.
I'll hand you back to Michael and Dana to talk a bit about Yom Hazikaron and life in Israel.
Hello.
Hi.
So, yeah, I don't know if you could, how well you could hear the siren. I got a message saying people couldn't hear so well, but did you get the pictures?
Yes, so the streets are very empty, was the first thing you all noticed, of course.
Yeah, so the streets are empty. The truth is, when you get all those videos, kind of they share internationally about people getting out of their cars, they probably don't show what I showed, because there are quite a few Arabs who use that road, and I imagine that's probably why there were some cars driving. There were definitely also some people who were, I don't know if you kind of got the thing, were hooting at people who didn't notice at the beginning.
Right.
People kind of got the hang of it, and I don't know if you could see in the background, but there was a bridge with people who'd gone to the bridge above the road with loads of Israeli flags. Try to show that in the background.
Right.
But this is the scene. People from their homes, kind of 100 meters outside their houses, are trying to remember Yom Hazikaron. Of course, today normally people would be flocking to military cemeteries. Normally, I go to Har Herzl, where there's you can't move at 11 o'clock. People kind of come the whole morning. At 11 o'clock, you hear the siren, and that's the moment kind of when everything stops.
So I presume the cemeteries are closed today.
Yeah, they locked all the military cemeteries across the country. So people have been going over the course of the past week, if they have a specific person to visit, but today they banned it altogether. So everyone's sort of trying to figure out ways to acknowledge the day from home.
So this is what we're struggling with bereavements here in general, with Levias, with half a dozen people and no shivers. You've got obviously the additional pain, the challenge, the psychological challenge of things like Yom Hazikaron and even Yom HaShoah, where the normal observances are just not taking place. And in a country that's based on Jewish mourning practices, that must be particularly difficult.
You'll just mute other people.
Yeah. One sec.
What was interesting about Yom HaZikaron? You can hear?
Yeah.
What was interesting about Yom HaZikaron as opposed to Pesach, for example, is that on Seder night there was a total lockdown from, let's say, an hour before Pesach started, kind of an hour, like 6 o'clock in the evening, just before Seder night, until the next morning, which meant that no one could leave their houses more than 100 meters. And that included shopping and medicines. So, you know, the shops would shut. Everyone had to get, if you were secular, you had to get your stuff during the day. And then if you wanted to go on first day Chag and go to a medicine, fine, you can do that, but not during Seder nights, because they wanted people to be home Seder night. What's interesting is that on Yom HaZikaron, they actually, the government said that they would not physically stop people going to a military cemetery.
Right.
Although they
locked the gates though, but you can approach it. So
yeah, and the thing is that although they're closed, they weren't going to physically accost anyone and kind of have an, you know, normally with police, if they have a law to interpret, they'll kind of, you know, go the extra mile and make sure that people don't listen to them. But when it comes to Yom HaZikaron, they were told to exercise more sensitivity and not, after the initial kind of, you know, this is closed, they're told not to do anything else because, as you said, of the psychological impact that Yom HaZikaron has on people.
The only thing is that arguably is precisely when people need protection, when they're vulnerable. And I mean, just to give you an example, I've been at Levias, not now, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, where people were so starved of human contact that, you know, they did hug and did embrace and strangers, and that's very difficult. But people perhaps need protecting from themselves almost.
The Yom HaShoah, what they did in Yom HaShoah, the police. So on Yom HaShoah, I don't know whether this is happening on Yom HaZikaron, but Yom HaShoah, the police in Jerusalem went round to Holocaust survivors' homes, and they stood outside during the siren and saluted them.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes also broadcast a message as well, which really was actually, for me, the most emotional moment of Yom HaShoah, of all of the different things happening. And the idea, of course, was to, as you said, to try and, you know, as much as possible, be with people at that moment. I imagine that something of that nature is happening on Yom HaZikaron, because normally the IDF sends soldiers to every grave of every, I definitely think of any soldier without any mourner, any kind of, you know, family to mourn, but also even, I know that kind of anecdotally, people who just go to kind of families they don't know, but they're just assigned to a person. The idea that the IDF will always stand with the people who've fallen.
usually in the lead up to Yom Hazikaron, there's a huge amount of national preparation on a public scale. And so Har Herzl, which is the biggest military cemetery in the middle of Jerusalem, they make sure that every single grave, thousands of graves, has a candle and a flag in the lead up to Yom Hazikaron. And then they assign a soldier to make sure that no grave doesn't have someone, is alone during the siren at 11 a.m. And then the national ceremony takes place there as well. And so all of these sort of acknowledgements, especially going back to Yom HaShoah, is, as you were saying, it's this balance of what we're a Jewish state, and at a state level, they need to do something, but what can that be? And so for Yom HaShoah, they chose to send police to stand outside the buildings of Shoah survivors, so they should know that, you know, the state values them and acknowledges their experiences. And so to today, there's been a lot of that different and yet still significant mourning.
We think of Israelis as being quite tough, the Sabra, but the other side of it we're seeing is a significant sensitivity to people's human needs. We've seen this also in Bnei Brak with the IDF. We've seen pictures of food and so on and so forth. Not to get political, I'm just genuinely curious. Does that sort of strategy come from government or from the military?
We don't really have kind of a government that's able to
That's true. You only just got one.
project kind of any kind of should we say like sensitivity or moral authority. It's not like, it's very functional like at the moment. So I don't necessarily think it comes to that. I very much think it's grassroots. I think what we saw in Bnei Brak was actually very interesting, because that had the potential to be a disaster. The idea of sending the Israeli Defense Forces into one of the most anti-Zionist areas of Israel, and it was very confronting for people in Bnei Brak, because they, at the end of the day, part of the reason why they were in the problem they were in is because originally the leaders didn't take coronavirus seriously. They did eventually, and Bnei Brak has taken it seriously. But at the beginning they didn't, and it's a crisis on not just a health crisis, but it's a crisis in leadership, and it's also then a crisis which is solved by people who you really feel uncomfortable with, kind of coming in and having to enforce a lockdown. I don't think we'll know the results of that incident. I think people will be talking and writing about what happened in Bnei Brak for years to come. But I definitely think that that there was a lot of positivity that came out because of the human interaction, which just was spontaneous.
So great for those soldiers to go into an area where they felt that they weren't welcome and weren't acknowledged would also have been a huge challenge. And yet, at the end of the day, they say everyone has to face coronavirus in the same way. It doesn't discriminate, and so therefore, in some ways, it's bringing us together. And anecdotally, the stories that are coming out of Bnei Brak now are quite amazing. People saying, wow, I spoke to the Haredim, and it was just an old grandma, like my old grandma, or like the soldiers who were handing out food and toys to the children, and the children realizing that they're not an enemy, but they really are all on the same side. So hopefully we'll have a significant positive impact to come. But on both sides, it was a huge challenge for them to accept the other side enough to work together to deal with the situation.
I remember seeing years ago during the Gulf War, there was a CNN correspondent interviewing some Israelis, and I think they were with their gas masks or in their sealed room, whatever. And the CNN correspondent was clearly, having a panic attack, and the Israelis are like, yeah, we're just watching Monty Python and whatever it was. Israelis are used to, unfortunately, trauma and high stress situations. This is a strange one. Everyone's at home, ostensibly doing nothing, but obviously under extreme pressure. How are people coping? And also, are you seeing the same increase in the volunteering spirit that we're seeing over here, where communities are coming together in ways that hasn't happened for 70 years, 80 years?
Definitely, we are seeing that volunteering spirit. There's a lot of, call out anyone who has a car who can deliver food packages to elderly people, and then a day later you'll hear how many hundreds of packages they managed to deliver, and people asking their neighbors if they need assistance. And there is definitely a lot of that spirit coming out, which obviously is fantastic to see. It is challenging, as I'm sure you guys have seen. In England, at the end of the day, the one thing you want to do is go and support people, and you can't go and support people. But people are trying the best that they can. And yes, it definitely is that mentality of, well, if the government says that we need to, shelter and protect and go into a war mentality, then people here are very able to do that. And I've noticed people who've been here a lot longer than us who are talking about the Gulf War and how, back then we didn't have screens, we didn't have TV, and so like it's all fine, we can all just do it again now, and we'll all get through this together. And definitely that that mindset is coming out. And then also just the understanding that sometimes we need to do something for the greater good, and sometimes the government needs to do things that, like, tell us stay in our houses that we may not like, but it is for the greater good, because some people here have experienced, going through war and sacrificing for the state, that I think that is a more natural mentality to have over here. So obviously it is, a very difficult and negative time, but you definitely do see those rays of light coming through.
Anything else you wanted to share?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think Israel has has a default trauma mode, which kind of it's you see it even in, I don't want to get too political here, but you see it in the tone of the Prime Minister. Many people really don't like him. Many people do like him. It's obviously very controversial, but he has a tone of kind of like being able to give an instruction in a time of crisis, which whether people, even the people who the half the population didn't vote for him, or they listen mostly. And I think that, you know, that's something that, that tone, if you like, you don't see that necessarily in other countries. And I think it starts from there. It comes in the hospitals. They know, you know, they know how to deal with kind of those kind of situations. And I think that's definitely contributed to Israel kind of getting through this period. It definitely has been a trauma, because, you know, even if there's one death, it's a trauma. But relative to other countries of the similar population size, Israel has amazingly managed to minimize loss of life, to the extent that very, very, very few people have died in the whole country who weren't already ill, which is kind of seemingly a bit of a remarkable achievement. And I think that's something that people are definitely kind of reflecting on this Yom Hazikaron. Yeah.
Just again, talking about the Prime Minister, he himself lost a brother in the army years ago in the Entebbe mission. And so to know that when the Prime Minister talks on Yom Hazikaron, it is personal for him, it's far more personal for him than it is for us. You know, thank God we haven't experienced that. That really brings the country together. He talks about his experiences, and it's not just a politician who's acknowledging some national memorial day. And that's really what it's like over here. You know, this week it's personal, because so many people have experienced or are descendants from the Holocaust, which was, you know, we acknowledged last week, and then we come through today, which really almost everyone in the country has a personal connection to. And that allows us to get through to tomorrow. And we still have people alive today who were here in 1948 and experienced the beginning of the state. And it's a very, very real, true celebration, especially with so many people who, you know, made Aliyah and chose to live here and are able to celebrate that tomorrow. And it's a very emotional week. And they say, you know, in Israel, we have 2 memorial days a week apart, one to acknowledge the price of having a state, but also one to acknowledge the price of not having a state. And there's a reason that Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron are 1 week apart, because they are intrinsically connected, but all the more so Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut. We can't celebrate tomorrow without first going through today and acknowledging what it took for us to get here. And so we spend today thinking about the sacrifices, thinking about the loss, and then somehow tonight make this switch into this celebratory party, thanking Hashem mode for what we have in front of us. And it's a process that the entire nation goes through on a very personal and then also a very national level. And so even though tomorrow is going to be very different, obviously, because usually the parks are filled with people having barbecues and hiking all over the country, that's not going to be the case. But many people are still planning to have a barbecue in their backyard, play their Israeli music, wave their flags, and just spend that time celebrating, because how can we not celebrate Yom HaTzmaut even if we are confined to our houses?
I was going to say that anyone's ever been in Israel for Yom HaTzmaut, besides the silly string, it's really it's a really sort of social occasion. But over here we're seeing people flouting rules. You're saying basically Israelis are following the rules, and people will be doing things on their own. Just ask about minyanim, because obviously we understand that there are possibly 1 or 2 minyanim taking place legally, like at the Kotel. But in the main, most people are not going to a minyan. That must be very strange in a culture where you go and daven 3 times a day and you've got 20 shuls on your block. How's that for people?
Before I let Michael answer that, look, obviously there are people who are flouting the rules. There are always going to be. And that's just a reality. Not everyone's going to listen. But I think overall, at least what we're seeing in our circles and in our neighborhoods, is that people are at least trying to make an effort, because they do understand that there's a reason behind this. But Michael can talk more about the minyanim.
Also, I'll add as well that Yom HaTzmaut from tonight, the Yom HaZikaron, you're allowed to kind of go on a 500-meter exercise, but on Yom HaTzmaut, it's going to be total lockdown for 27 hours. That means you can't leave your house more than 100 meters, which is like Seder night, which just gives you a scale about how much people kind of celebrate it. I don't know if you have time. Afterwards, I have a few more thoughts on Yom HaZikaron, but I'll answer the minyanim question. For sure, it's been very difficult. Interestingly, they did allow minyanim, as when they started easing the restrictions a week ago, they did allow outdoor minyanim, 19 people only, with masks, and 2 meters apart. But
19, it's gone up. We used to have 10 when our shul was open.
Yeah, imagine what. Well, Dave as
well, presumably, yeah.
It's because if you have 20, then you can split, and that's better.
Right.
There. So the truth is that I was organising a minyan on my street when in the period of banning shuls, buildings, and banning minyanim entirely. We haven't restarted it, and a lot of rabbis that I know are not prepared to. Interestingly, it's not a right-left split. It's not like, even in the Haredi world, there are different opinions. It's not like kind of, the more Haredi ones are going to daven and the modern ones don't. There's a lot of question about whether we should or not. And most of the rabbis I know I'm not davening outside, just because people felt that it was more of a political concession to open minyanim up and not a health consideration. And I think in terms of my own decision, I think I'll see what happens in a couple of weeks and see what happens as a result of the minyanim that are currently taking place, and we'll see whether indeed it was safe to have minyanim.
This is where we go back to Yom Hazikaron. So are they actually easing the lockdown a bit now? Israel's ahead of us, I think.
There are a lot of rumors about what's going to happen next week. I think they're going to wait till after Yom Ha'atzmaut to announce it. They have taken us from a 100-meter rule around our houses to 500 meters if exercising, which is a significant difference. We don't know. It looks like it's going to be eased next week, but at this point in time, it's mainly rumors.
Right.
Schools might open. That's the main rumor.
Right.
For young kids. So yeah, just a few other things on Yom Hazikaron that I just kind of wanted to share with you. One of them is I was actually thinking about this during reading. I'm sure everyone's been reading like the news and seeing the statistics and looking at curves and looking at exponential graphs and all that kind of stuff. It's very depressing. One of the things that I noticed, I always read the Times of Israel, which I recommend if anyone's interested in following Israeli news. In the English language, Times of Israel really has got it covered. And Times of Israel every day had an update about the numbers, how many people died. And what was fascinating is that every day they had the names. You could read the names. You knew who they were. It just said, a person, we know that the first victim of coronavirus in Israel was a Holocaust survivor called, I believe, Aryeh Even. I might have had a whole bad name. But everyone knows the names. In other countries, you don't get that, partly because of the size, but also because Israel has made a big effort at kind of reducing casualties. And I think it just shows one of the difference between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron is, I think, mostly, the numbers are obviously totally different. On Yom HaShoah, there are still, the number 6 million, people say the word 6 million because we don't know the number, which is just like, it's an untold tragedy of that we have to use a round number because we don't even know how many people died in the Holocaust. We have over I think it's 4.5 million names, I think Yad Vashem have, and they don't think they're ever going to get to 6 million, even though they've obviously calculated based on various different statistics that is the number. In Yom HaZikaron, you'll see on people's Facebook status is the exact number, which this year is, I believe, 23,115, 75 more than last year. I might be wrong by a few digits, but we know the number, we know every name, and we know every number, and that is the difference between the Jewish people since the state of Israel was founded. That we, it's not that there's no tragedy, it's not that there's no sacrifice, but we know the names, and I think that translates into all areas of Israeli life, and it's quite in the tragedy of coronavirus and Yom HaZikaron, it's a little bit of comfort that the people won't be forgotten, and that the country is one big community. So that's one thing I wanted to share with you. A couple of other things that also about just commemorating Yom HaZikaron, just so that you might be interested in. If any of you can speak Ivrit, there is a website, and I'll put it when we finish talking, I'll put it on the chat. Even if you only look at the website, I think it's quite inspiring. It's something called, I think, Care for Brothers. I'm not sure the name, but the website is a unified platform created this year for people to share their stories of their loved ones who fell in Yom HaZikaron. And the idea is that in the same way, if you want to set up a Zoom meeting, so you invite your friends. So this is like, it's a platform. So people want to talk about their lost brother or son or whatever. They upload when it's going to be, the Zoom link. You have to register and kind of just go through a very small registration process, and then you can join. And there are people who've been campaigning for those who didn't have, you can see the participant numbers, you can open it to different numbers of people, and those who had a small number, and people are encouraging people to join, to make sure that no Zoom session was was empty.
So So essentially, they created this public platform, people to be able to tell their story to strangers over Zoom because they would not have otherwise had the chance to talk about it or share that story this year. And that was sort of a grassroots project so that people would be able to, again, acknowledge today and share the story and hear the stories.
So yes, I'm going to send a link. You can, the website is in English and Hebrew, and there are some sessions. I couldn't really find sessions in English. I tried to. You can search for English sessions, but I think most of them are in Hebrew. And as well, another thing as well, I wanted to kind of just an anecdote from last night is you probably heard that in Pesach there was an agreement, kind of a countrywide agreement to sing Manishtana from the balconies. And it happened. We were during Seder night. We got up to Manishtana. You know, Hadad disappointed. She didn't sing Manishtana this year. So we kind of went out, and you could hear Manishtana, and we were singing it. So last night, I didn't actually see the official thing, but you heard twice last night. People sang Hatik out the windows, and it's definitely something that I thought was a poignant moment. So, if people have any questions, people can ask, but we both wanted to say we're so happy, very honored to be able to speak to everyone and give you a little taste of Yom Hazikaron. Definitely make the most of the day and watch loads of videos. Actually, you can send Rabbi Wallenberg links of stuff, good things to watch. And Yom Hazikaron.
I sent out the Mizrahi link for their program. If you've got anything else, definitely please, just put it on the Shul Facebook group or send it to me.
I'll put it in the chat in a second. And also, we just loved seeing all your faces, and we hope to be able to see you in person soon.
Absolutely. And we wish a happy first birthday to Hadar, which was quite big.
Thank you.
Just remember,
I've unmuted everyone, so folks, feel free to. Obviously, there's about 25 of us, so I'm sure we'll find a way to not drown each other out. Can I just thank you both for your time? It's very strange talking something completely different. We should do this on a regular Yom Hazikaron, actually connect people in Israel, and instead of just watching the pictures of cars stopped and so on. Perhaps that's something we should adopt. Your time.
Rabbi Wallenberg.
Hi.
I just wanted to let you know that Dana's dad is online in Melbourne. Jono.
lovely.
With the Israeli flag.
Yeah.
Hi, Jono.
Who it is?
Just remember that there are more Jewish people amongst the world, people in the world than we think of. We're not alone. There's loads of us here. I've got a book here I bought over 30 years ago, and I'll read you the first two sentences of it. It's called My Gorgeous Life, an Adventure by Dame Edna Everidge. And the first chapter is chapter 1, My Roots. I am probably Jewish. Let's face it, possums, shake everyone's family tree, and more often than not, a Red Sea pedestrian falls out and on his feet. I'll leave that with you.
Red Sea pedestrian.
You never saw Monty Python, Red Sea pedestrians are Jews.
Right.
I just wanted to mention a custom at this time of year. We got this, Judy's got cousins in Israel, and they sent us a photo, and it's to do with her mother, who's a Holocaust survivor. And every year at this time, 2 soldiers turn up at her door and present her with a flower and a certificate. And I think that's Holocaust survivors. Is that true, Michael?
I'm not sure of the exact details, but I have heard similar stories before. There's a lot of effort to acknowledge the individuals on these days.
It's very nice.
So can I just say, while Dana's dad is online and about
Oh, it's just disappeared.
in his absence, I'd just like to say how small the Jewish world is. That my aunt in Israel contacted me saying that she had a relative in Australia who didn't have anyone to look after them. And did I know anyone in the community? So I contacted, I think, Julian and Pam. They contacted Michael and Dana, who contacted Dana's parents. And within a very short space of time, your father very kindly helped out my not even my, I don't know, my aunt's cousins, whoever it is, and it was really much appreciated. So first of all, the power of technology, and secondly, the power of the small act. But we see how small the world is, even from Australia to England to Israel, is a lot closer than it used to be. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. We're going to go and have some breakfast. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye,
Enjoy. Enjoy.
Lovely to see everyone.
So if you're not in a rush, Michael and Dana, what I'll do is I've got to go to another meeting. This is my life right now. But I'll just leave the room open and people
Where am I? I don't know.
ask
No,
questions.
I just send the link for the
Thank you very much.
in the chat.
We'll put it in the Facebook.
I will share that elsewhere as well. Okay, I'm going to mute.
Where's Hadar?
Oh, yeah.
Sleeping.
Where's Hadar?
She's asleep. Snap time.
Lovely to see everybody.
Okay,
Lovely
thank
to
you all
see
for
you too.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good to see you
Michael.
again.
Love to you both. Be safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay well.
Auntie Tricia, lovely to see you.
Where are you today, David?
What?
Where are you?
Actually,